Good afternoon. This is the black man who reads aloud, continuing my personal journey through the Federal Writers Project, the Alabama Slave Narratives. Today it's Tuesday, October the 19th, and we are going to be reading the recollections of Joseph Holmes, a personal interview with Joseph Holmes, Grand Avenue, Pritchard, Alabama, by Ella B. Bryan of Mobile, Alabama. Standing in the middle of the road at Pritchard, suburb of Mobile, and gesticulating while talking to a small group of interested listeners, an old Negro man ended his talk to the small gathering and punctuated his last sentence with a splat of tobacco. Noon? Noon? He continued. I had just put in my appearance and asked him a question. I doesn't know whether I was a slave, but just give me same I see General Grant's army when it went through Virginia. Just as sure as you standing there, lady, I seen them men's all dressed in blue suits a marching side by side, going down the road past our place. It took 'em 3 days to go by our home or our house. And I remembers when them Yankees came to our missus' home and take a ladder and climb up to the roof and tear the boards out of the ceiling to get them big hams and shoulders my white folks done had hid up there. When the Yankees find that stuff, they give it to all the niggers. Then after the soldiers left, old Miss called us to her and told us we was free, but for us to give back some of that meat and things that the Yankees done gave us, 'cause she didn't have nothing to eat round the place. Of course, we was glad to do it, case and Mrs. Show was good to us. I remembers every Sunday morning that she'd make the oldest slaves bring all the little niggas up to the big house so she could read the Bible to them. And then she'd give us plenty of them good biscuits and taters that Suzanne cooked for us. She'd say, "Get round there, Suzanne, and help them little niggers' plates." I really thought Mrs. was an angel. Talking about niggas being free, old Miss told us was free, but it was 10 or 12 years after the surrender before I knowed what she meant. I was a big boy going to school before I had understanding as to what she meant. Old Miss taught the niggas how to read and write, and some of them got to be good at it. Casing they learned how to write too many passes so the patrollers wouldn't catch them. And on them occasions, they was the onlyest time that I ever seen one of our niggas punished. Mrs. never allowed no mistreating of the slaves. Case they was raising slaves for the market, and it wouldn't be good business to mistreat them. Lord, Miss, my white folks was rich. They had as many as 500 or 600 niggas, men, women, and children. The plantation was big, but I doesn't remember how many acres it was. But I does remember that the cabins were all built in a row, and there was sheets laid out among the cabins. The chimneys was built out of dirt and sticks, and you know up in Virginia it got powerfully cold, so when they built their cabins, they throw dirt up under them to keep the wind and snow out. I was born in Henry County, Virginia, near Danville, and I has been to Vicksburg and Petersburg many a time with my pappy to the wheat and backer market. Lord, honey, Virginia is the best place on earth for good eating and good white folks. If anybody tells you that white folks was mean to the niggers, they never come from Virginia. Case us was too near the free states. And I done already told you that they raise niggers to sell them and to keep them in good condition. In those days, white folks and black folks was black folks, just like Booker T. Washington was a river between the niggers in this generation in learning. He had all that was fine and good, and he gave his best to his people if and they would take it. That was the way with the white folks then. They didn't do no whipping. I I I think the onlyest rat left in the pond in case I hung in the smokehouse. Folks think I's not as old as I say I is, but child, I've been here a long time. I remembers how Black Sam used to preach to us, and when I growed up, I used to think weren't nobody Christian except us Baptists. But I know better now, and the longer I live, the more I realize that the churches go way case they leaves off the ordinances of God, although us has a Bible and a more Christian reading than ever before. You see, my mama's name was Eliza Rollins, and my papa's name was Joseph Holmes. My pappy had the same name as the people that owned him, and my grandmama's name was Lucy Holmes. Grandmama Holmes lived to be over 100 years old, and she was the first person I'd ever seen dead. In them days, it took 3 days to bury a person, in case they dug the graves as deep as the corpse was tall. Land of sakes of living, us had great times, and I forget to tell you that us had homemade beds with two sides nailed to the wall, and the mattress was made out of wheat straw. And for hunting, I done plenty of it. And one thing I got to forget is for forgiveness for was when I left Virginia, I left about 650 or 60 snares to catch rabbits and birds. My mammy had 8 children, and we was raised in pairs. I had a sister who come along with me, and if and I jumped in the river, she done it too. And if and I go through a briar patch, here she come along too. About the fruit, it make my mouth water to think about them cheese apples. They was yellow like gold, and there's Abraham apples, and the cherry trees as big as these oaks here. I was eating a big sugary and sweetheart cherry. But there was another kind called the gorilla that growed as big as the yellow plums down this way. Now let me tell you something about Virginia. They had their laws about drink. They had the best peach and cherry brandy and most any kind you'd ever heard of, but they didn't allow you to make drink out in anything you could make bread with, such as corn or rye. Us had our brandy same as you would have coffee, in case it was cold, and some mommy's pappy, and some mommy's pappy would get the gin out, and mammy would put a little sugar and water with it and give it to us children. Us never thought nothing about drinking. I kind of believes like that old infidel Ingersoll who said that anything that was a custom was their religion. Now you asked about hog killing time. That was the time of the times. For weeks the men would haul wood and big rocks and pile them together as high as this house, and then have several piles like that round a big hole in the ground what would be filled with water. That was just a little after midnight. The boss would blow the old horn, and all that men's would get up and get in them pig pens, and then they would sort back a pile of wood on fire and then start knocking them hogs in the head. Us never shot a hog like us does now. Us always used an axe to kill him with. After knocking the hog in the head, they would tie a rope on his leg, and other the water got to got got to the right heat from the red hot rocks. The hogs would be thrown in a drug round in a while, and then taken out and cleaned. After he was cleaned, he was cut up to sections and hung up in the smokehouse. Lordy lady, they don't cure meat these days. They just use some kind of liquid to brush over it. We used to have some show enough meat. Then come the craw shucking times. My goodness, I would just love to be there now. The craw would be piled up high, and one man would get on that pile, and it was usually a kind of nigger foreman who would sing and get the work out of the niggers. The foreman would sing a verse something like this: Poke and Clay went to war, Poke come back with a broken jaw. Then all the niggers would hang would sing back at him, and with a kind of shouting sound. Near about all the times the foreman made up his own songs by picking them out of the shucking. It wore the jug that they brung around every hour. That's the onlyest time them slaves really got drunk. In the old days, I went to plenty of dances and candy pullings during the Yule season, but I doesn't do that no more. I was a preacher, and when I first left Virginia, I come to Georgia and stayed there 20 years, where I kicked up a plenty of dust. I even taught school there. Then I come to Alabama and lived in Evergreen for about 20 more years. Since I've been in Mobile, I worked with such men as old Simon Danbridge and Van Antwerp. And all their children has been in these here arms of mine. I've been a square citizen, and there hasn't been a time that I had to call on nobody but Uncle Sam when old man Pression caught me. But thank the Lord, I'm still able to get around, and I have all my senses except my eyesight, and it's just a little problem. Eyes has got all my teeth except one, and my mammy always proud of my hair. You see how silky and fine it is? Not quite white though. I hopes I lives long enough to turn it white as snow. I think St. Peter would like it better that way. Chapter 2, personal interview with Joseph Holmes, Grand Avenue, Pritchard, Alabama, Isla B. Prime, Mobile, Alabama. 12 years till I understood surrender. In the middle of a road near Pritchard, an unincorporated suburb of Mobile, stood an aged Negro man gesticulating as he told a tale of a small audience. Tall, straight, with gray hair and mustache, he was a picturesque figure. He does not know whether he was born in slavery, he said, but he knows his age to be about 81. I doesn't know whether I was a slave, but I seen General Grant's army when they went through Virginia. He said, just as sure as you standing there, lady, I seen him, and I seen all them men dressed in blue, marching side by side. Just in gone down the road past our place. It took them 3 days to get past our house. 3 days worth of soldiers marching. That's a lot of soldiers. And I remember when the Yankees come to old Mrs. House and took a ladder and climbed up on the roof and tear the boards out of the ceiling to get them big hams and shoulders that they hid up there. I sure does. The woman make the slaves hide with the meat, and when the Yankees finish the stuff, they just give all to the niggas. And I remembers how old Miss calls us to her at the that and told us that we was free, but she told us that us had to give back all that meat and serves because she didn't have a bit to eat. Of course, we was glad to do it because old Miss Shaw was good to her slaves. I remember every Sunday morning she'd make the older slaves bring all the niggas to her big white two-story house, and she so she could read the Bible to us, and then she gives us plenty good biscuits and taters that she had to cook. Suzanne cook for us. She say, "Get round there, Suzanne, and help them little nigger plates." I really thought old Miss was an angel. Talking about being free, old Miss told us we was free, but it was about 10 or 12 years after the surrender before I knew what she was talking about. I was a big boy going to school before I had any understanding of what she meant. Old Miss Lee taught us niggas how to read and write, and some of us got to be too efficient with the writing case the law how to because the law could learn how to write too many passes so the patrollers wouldn't get them. The only time I ever knowed old Miss that had their slaves punished. Old Miss never allowed no mistreating of the slaves. That's in case the case was raising slaves for the market, and it wouldn't be no good business to retreat them. Lord, Mom, white folks, my white folks was rich. They had as many as 500 or 600 niggers, men, women, and children. The plantation was big, but I don't remember how many acres. I does remember the cabins was all built in rows, and the streets was laid out between the cabins. The chimneys was built out of dirt and sticks and you know, up in Virginia it got terrible cold, and the snow would pile up. So when the cabins was built, the men throw dirt under the house to keep the snow and the cold out. You might think that dirt would wash out from under the house, but it didn't. It just made them so warm and comfortable we didn't suffer. That was the way with the white folks then. They didn't do much whipping or mistreating the slaves. Oh, once in a while, old Miss might slap the cook's face and tell her to bear down round there. And if she wanted the serving boys to hurry, she would say, "Clutch hit," meaning for them to cut many steps and get about in a hurry. I is the oldest rat in the pond. In case I ain't hung in these smokehouses. Folks think I's not as old as I say I is, but child, I've been here. I remember how Sam used to preach to us when we was at old Miss Place, and when I growed up, I remember how I used to think nobody was a Christian except us Baptists. But I know it's better now, and the longer I live, the more I realize that the churches go away, the cases that leaves off the ordinances of God. Thus us has to got a Bible and more Christian literature than ever before. You know, my mom's name was Liza Rollins. My mom's daddy's name was Joseph Holmes. My daddy had the same people as the people who what owned him, and my grandma's name was Lucy Holmes. My grandma Lucy liked to be 100 years old, and she was the first person I'd ever seen dead. It took 3 days to buy a person then. In case they dug the graves as deep as you is tall, which means no more than 5 feet deep. Lord sakes, a living us had great times. I forgot to tell you this. Has had homemade beds with 2 sides nailed to the wall. And the mattress was made out of wheat straw. That minds me that dad want no more, no poor cattle in them times, because You could go where they thresh the wheat and get all the straw you wanted to feed dry cattle on it. And you won't believe the fruits that we had. You ain't never seen that like down this way, such as apples, cherry, quinces, peaches, and pears. As for hunting, I done plenty of it. And one thing I got the forgiveness for was when I left Virginia. I left about 60 or 70 snares to catch rabbits and birds. My mom had 8 children, and we was raised in pairs. I had a sister who come along with me, and if you jumped in that river to swim, she'd hit it too. If I climbed a tree or went through a briar trash, she done right by she done hit it right behind me. Ma wanted to know why her clothes were so tore up, and when they was pretty, we make it make hit right with Ma by buying bringing or having a rabbit or coon with us or something, or sometimes a mud turtle. As for possums and coons, us catch them in a plenty. About them fruit, he'd make mouth my mouth my mouth watch you think about them cheese apples that was yellow like gold, and those Abraham apples that lack what of which we ain't now to be had, and those cherry trees as big as these oaks with long limbs and big sugar and sweetheart blackheart cherries. And then there was another kind of cherry called the gorilla that was round and growed as big as your yellow plums down this way. Now let me tell you something about Virginia. It had its own laws about drink. They made the best preaching cherry brandy and most any kind you'd ever heard of, except that they didn't allow you to make drink out of anything you could make into bread. Now you understand, such as corn and rye. Us had our brandy same as you'd have coffee, case it was cold, and some mornings us would get up and the snow would be halfway up to the dew, and the men would have to ditch it out, and so us would get out of the house on them rare cold mornings. My daddy would get the gin or get the brandy and out, and my mom would put a little water and sugar with it and give it to the children, and then she'd take some in her mouth and put it in the baby's mouth, and it would open its eyes and stamp its foot rail per lack. Us never thought nothing of drinking. I kind of believe like the old Affendale Ingersoll, who said anything that was done that was the custom was the religion. Folks was kind of hearted back then they is now. Case they kept giving big dogs to hunt people lost in the snow. They all seemed more happy. Case they was all busy all night. Instead of wasting time, they would go to the big house and spin a weave and make cloths. I kind of had that I kind of heard that old loom humming now, and I see great cards of cloth coming out, and them was the cloths that they was made from it. It took fire to get them often, they was so strong. I doesn't remember what they was used for, but I knows they used the copperas as sizing to hold the colors. Some of the cloths was dyed red and black and blue. I just can't remember about the dye, but they used copperas. That was the qualifications of the intelligence of the primitive age in using the copperas. They not only made our clothes, but also made out our hats. Of course, they wasn't very hatty, but mostly cappy. They made them with tabs over the ears and a tie under the chin, and it was day warm, I'll say. Now, when your axe is about hog killing time, that was the time for weeks the men would haul wood and big rocks and pile it all together as high as the house, and them have several piles of these round a big hole in the ground what was filled with watchets. Then just a little after midnight, the boss would blow the old horn, and all the men would get up and get in them hog pens. Then they would set that pile of wood on fire and start knocking them hogs in the head. Us never shot a hog like they does now. And us use the axe to kill the hogs. After knocking the hogs in the head, they would tie a rope on its legs, and after the water got to be right heat from the dose and red hot rocks what had been pushed out of the dab hot or Newton wood in the watcher, they would throw the hog in and drag it around and take him out and have him cleaned in about 3 pairs of minutes. And after he was clean, they hung him up and later cut him and hung him in the smokehouse.